Wagwan, everybody. Welcome to the Diaspora History Podcast, where we'll be speaking about history and as well family history and how history relates in terms of Caribbean people for the present as well as in the past, and how in the past, what that does and brings forth for what we are going through at present and what we can learn from our history, from our family, and take that moving forward. So I do hope you enjoy the podcast. And if you like it, please ensure to subscribe, like, and review. Thank you.
As we know, it was illegal for enslaved people to read and write. Mm-hmm. Illegal. Because knowledge is power.
Yes.
Right? If you can read and understand and comprehend the society around you, you will be free. Black kids are inherently, quote unquote, stupid. Because if you keep them stupid, quote unquote, then they don't have power. So if you teach these kids these things, it empowers them to say, well, no, I am going to read a book.
Yeah.
A function of archives is to make it intimidating for the lay person, for the regular person, because if everybody had free reign to go into an archive, now they have unadulterated access to the truth. You as a taxpayer, when it's taking that check, the money out your check, you are paying for these services. So use them.
Welcome to Diaspora History Podcast with your host, Wendy Aris. This is Season 8, Episode 1, with Dr. Christopher Stuart-Taylor. Dr. Stuart-Taylor is a historian, educator, and public scholar whose work sits at the crossroads of Caribbean history, Black migration, and family memory. He currently serves as the Associate Vice President, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Anti-Racism at the University of Waterloo, and is an Associate Professor in the Department of History and the Arts First program. We're here to discuss his book, Flying Fish in the Great White North, The Autonomous Migration of Black Barbadians, a work that speaks directly to Caribbean people who know migration not just as a policy process, but as a family story, passed down through recollection, photographs, remittances, letters, and silences. In this book, Dr. Stuart-Taylor centers Black Barbadian migrants as intentional movers, men and women who drew on kinship networks, island knowledge, and long Caribbean traditions of mobility to navigate Canada's racialized immigration system. These were not accidental journeys, but carefully planned acts shaped by ancestry, opportunity, and responsibility to those left behind. Our conversation explores how migration reconfigured Caribbean family life, ideas of respectability and belonging, and what it meant to carry Barbadian identity across borders. It also invites listeners, especially genealogists and descendants of migrants, to think about how these movements live on in archives, in surnames, in migration records, and in the stories families tell about why someone left home. At its heart, Flying Fish in the Great White North reminds us that Caribbean migration histories are also ancestral histories. Stories of survival, strategy, and self-determination that continue to shape who we are today. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Christopher Stuart-Taylor. So let's have a listen and enjoy the episode.
Before we start, I'll just have you just do a brief introduction of yourself so people can refamiliarize themselves with you, and if there are any new listeners, that they know who you are.
So my name is Christopher Stuart-Taylor. I am the Associate Vice President of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Anti-Racism at the University of Waterloo. I'm also an Associate Professor in the Department of History at the University of Waterloo.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And, yes, it is your book. What we have here, Flying Fish, the Great White North. Mm-hmm. However, there was a theme that came through when you first came on, and it was about, of course, the things that we could not be able to talk about, more so from the person that is, of course, experiencing that first migration, the experiences that they had experienced and went through. I just wanted to know if you could be able to speak a little bit more to that in terms of what that was, because you gave the example of the person experiencing extreme racism during that time. And of course, that's not going to be separate talk discussion or even one-on-one discussion. So if you can just walk us through as to why that would be kind of like a blockage or at least a barrier.
I think for a lot of folks, particularly in the 2020s, we need to sit back and think for a second. There's no Twitter. There's no WhatsApp, right? A phone call, international phone call was costing you an arm and a leg, literally and figuratively. People were experiencing some real trauma that they couldn't articulate. Because when we talk about, if you're this age now, we talk about mental health. For a lot of folks, mental health was, what's that?
Yeah.
Suck it up, move forward. Yeah. And you hear a lot too, particularly the West Indians, Caribbean people who migrated to the UK. Yeah. They just used to say, oh, so-and-so went mad.
Yes.
You hear it all the time. So-and-so went mad. They moved to England, they went mad. But you take this back for a second to think, wait a minute. This person, first of all, you move from a sunny location. You're getting sun 350 days a year. And those other 15 days, rain for like half a day, and it's sunny. You go to somewhere that's cold, damp, gray.
Yeah.
The warmest in the summer, maybe 15 Celsius. Winter is just rain.
Yeah.
Cold. You're sharing a bathroom with somebody. People bathe once a week. You got to share that bathroom. You're cramped up in a room. These are true stories. Like I'm telling my father's story.
Yeah.
You're cramped up in a room with a bunch of people. You're not outside playing on the road, going to the beach. This is your existence. So taking out the anti-Black racism, the racism factors, we now know about SAD, right? We now know about mental health, vitamin D. These are things people had no idea, and they just feel fundamentally different.
Yeah.
And you're removed from your family. What's known to you, your accents, right? So just living in a different space like that is having that particular impact. But when we talk about suppressing that trauma people don't want to talk about, you went to foreign, right? So you're supposed to be the top, living the life. When you go foreign, you're not supposed to be sharing a room with 5 other people. You're not supposed to be sharing a bed that so-and-so did the day shift and then you did the night shift and you share that bed. Everything's supposed to be, you're royalty now, right? You went to England, you're in London, you're in Brixton, everything is good. So you need to suppress that and keep on sending those remittances back home. Yeah. So for a lot of folks, this is happening. And it's, I don't want to say guilt that they had, but true experiences that, no, this is not what we read in our history books. This is not what we hear on the BBC. This is not how, the UK or Canada or the US is supposed to be. So you should be happy. So now you need to suppress that trauma that you've had of just literally living in a foreign space. And you're supposed to be like, I'm grateful for this. On top of that, you get the racism. Right? A form of racism that we can't even articulate in the 2020s. People talk about George Floyd, right? People talk about even 92 with Rodney King or the Young Street Rebellion in Toronto. When you talk about, for example, the Teddy Boys in the UK in the 60s, you were trying to walk home and you're getting beat up. And there's no race relations commission that you could run to, no equity office. Yeah. You're just getting beat. And that's it. But you got to go to work the next day.
With a smile. With a smile.
Because if you don't, what happens? You get kicked out. And so it happens that, and we hear it all the time, particularly around, Black West Indian men or Black Caribbean men, masculinity and suppressing trauma. It's because they had no other choice.
Well, not only that, it reminds me of, when, growing up, having that community and knowing to see so many men, even though it was a fun time, but a lot of them were drinking. That was a huge, I would say, medication.
Medication. Yeah.
That they could use to cope. And some of the stories that would come out, it would be very extreme of what they heard. And as you said, the whole demasculation of them and who they were was huge.
Yeah.
was huge. So then you would see other things that would represent of who got the best car, who got the best rock to wear. These are the things that you would see, and you'd be, for me as a kid going, what the hell is all this about? And why do they need to do all of this extra? Yeah. But they were overcompensating for something else.
And that's for me, I can't. And maybe going through this book and hearing the stories and, there's folks like Makita Silvera, there's folks who've written books about newcomers and domestic servants and people into the UK, and they've captured their words. And when you're a kid, right, 10, 15 years old, you see what's happening, but you don't have the ability to articulate it.
Yeah.
And then you get to a point as an adult and you're thinking to yourself, I'm having these struggles as a 25-year-old, a 30-year-old, or 45-year-old, whatever it is. And then you put into context, my mother and my father, or my auntie or my uncle, they migrated when they're 21. Mm-hmm. So they were just trying to find themselves. On top of that, this is what they're experiencing. And it completely shifts your mindset. And you have a much more, not just sympathy, but empathy for what they're doing. And they're doing it by themselves and raising kids.
Exactly.
And some of them had kids at home in the Caribbean and in the UK or Canada, the US. And they still need to move forward. And particularly when you have kids, you're thinking to yourself, you were 25 years old and you had to leave your 2-year-old or your newborn with grandma. Imagine how that feels. People can't even leave the kid at daycare now for a day. And you got to leave. And there's, like I said, there's no WhatsApp video chat. No. There's nothing. You do not see your child grow. And on the flip side, you got these kids that don't even know their parents. Exactly. And then someone sends a letter and says, hey man, you got to come to Bristol. Mm-hmm. Like, where's Bristol? At 15 years old or 13 years old or 10 years old in your formative years. And a complete life shift.
Yeah.
So as I get older, again, I have much more empathy and sympathy being in these spaces to think, could I actually do what they did? And then you suppress that trauma. Again, there's no mental health supports. You suppress it.
Yeah, because when you're looking back, doing all this research, you get to see it completely different. Yeah. You get to see, you take yourself as the example most times to say, could I have done that? Could I have left my 12-month-old child?
Gone.
I've missed their formative years. By the time they, in my example for my mother, by the time her child was able to come to Canada, he was 7. Yeah. There was his whole good portion of his life, never to see what that development was, how to nurture, how to train. Yep. There was none of that. Mm-hmm. So there becomes a massive disconnection. And as you said, families from back home, families that are now created in the new place that they're now in, totally different interaction. Totally different interaction. And so the next thing we're going to go through is into the laws. Because the laws, those are what define the playground, right? Those are the parameters that we use. And of course, coming into Canada, as you described in your book, there was plenty.
Of course.
There was plenty. And for me, it really reminded me back of the slave codes as to what was deemed possible that somebody could and could not be able to do. Almost as, and you can now go to the bathroom at, 7 o'clock type of thing. But if you can just go into some of those and what the real restrictions of what that really meant.
And here's the big thing. And I'm gonna loop in this whole conversation today around DEI.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
DEI, EDI, and the quote unquote token hires and all that stuff.
But before you do that, just define DEI.
So DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. Okay. So you hear folks now saying they're quote unquote demonizing DEI. It's bad. Mm-hmm. Right? We shouldn't have, quote unquote special programs for people. And I'm like, okay, so where did this all come from?
Yeah.
And so if we start with this DEI, EDI conversation in the 2020s, I need us to go back to 1906, 1910, where in Canadian, when we talk about laws, so Canadian immigration law said you could stop anyone from coming into this country based on their race. Mm-hmm. Again, pushing in 1911, Canada was going to have the first order in council. So Wilfrid Laurier, prime minister at the time, first order in council. So basically proposing a law in parliament to say we can explicitly bar, not just by race, but if you're black, full stop, period. So we have this DEI conversation that your token. You have 1906, 1910, 1911, where there's laws that say you can't come here. But there's one caveat to that. The caveat was you could still come here, particularly if you're black, particularly if you're coming from the Caribbean. Because we got to remember, too, the Caribbean, West Indies, that's why I use the term West Indies. I'm talking about former British colonies.
Yes.
They're the exact same thing as Canada, legally, your colony. Canada, Australia, Barbados, Jamaica. Theoretically, the same thing. So again, there's little caveats in the laws to say, well, if your ancestors originated in the UK, if you lived in one of these foreign countries, you could come. So if you're white and were born in Barbados, you could migrate. But the little asterisk was, you could come here if you had, quote unquote, and this is where you can go into the archives and read this, exceptional merit. So if you were far and above what a quote unquote typical newcomer or immigrant was, they had legal grounds, again, legal but arbitrary grounds to let you in. So this is where we're tying this DEI conversation. So typically when you hear about DEI, it's always you need to be 10 times better to achieve the exact same job. Why? Because that was written in the law, exceptional merit. So for 100 years now, if you're thinking about it, 100 plus years, the only type of black West Indian or black person you'd let in this country is if you were so much better. So our laws created this ideology. So law, ideology, they go hand in hand, created this ideology that if you are so much better, we will let you in. And these are the conversations we don't have. So this whole thing about DEI and token hires, that was written in Canadian history and Canadian law that we must address. If not, we're just going to go, well, you're black, who cares?
Yeah. Pretty much, because you gave the example of one particular person and where she challenged for 13 years. Yeah. And I'm just sitting there going, how does someone even be able to wrap their mind around challenging? And I'm pretty sure it was done out of principle.
Of course. Because
13 years, that's a long time.
Yeah. We also need to understand, so there's if you go in the archives, there's somebody from Lucy, so St. Lucy, so Half Moon St. Lucy, challenging this, and it comes back to, it's funny, once she got her rejection letter, it said, you can't come here because it's too cold. So climate discrimination. Yeah. So again, in the 1910 immigration law, it says we can bar you from coming here if it's too cold. And we are recording this in January?
Yeah.
And we just had a snowstorm, 2 days ago?
Yes.
I don't know what country you're coming from. I don't know who wants to be slipping and sliding out here. But that was one of the caveats to say, well, you know what? Black people are from the tropics.
Yeah.
It's too cold. But then you look around to say, well, I was educated in a British system. I speak, quote unquote, perfect Queen's English. I've met all the requirements in the immigration laws. I'm a British subject, which you said you had to be a British subject. But now you're telling me I can't come because it's too cold. So we talk about fighting on principle. Yeah, you fight on principle. If you know you deserve to be in a particular space, why not? And you see these stories happen. Yeah. You see these stories, you see these conversations, and then you ask yourself, wow, could I do that from the age of 20 to 33 trying to get somewhere that doesn't actually want me to be here?
Yeah, it's a classic example of gaslighting somebody.
1,000%.
To a next level. But again, just fighting basically on principle for that. And, and you mentioned many others in your book in regards to, especially it's with the nurses, right? And,
Gloria Bayliss is a perfect example.
But with Barbados in general, because it was the first slave society, the first template for, again, for the slave codes, as well as, of course, religion. Because right now I'm reading about slave Christianity, and
that's a complex one. Hey, that's not for this podcast. I'm not touching that one.
But I'm just saying, in terms of, Barbados was the first, and I guess with your book being encapsulating all of this whole migration, how do you look at that in terms of, with Barbados, with them being the first, and of course just migration within the British Empire as well?
So for me, I always situate it maybe not in a positive light that some folks might see as positive, but I kind of flip it on its head. That understanding that Barbados, was the only Caribbean colony to have British rule from beginning to end. So 1627, some might argue 1627, 1639, first parliament, going all the way to 1966.
Yeah.
There's no Spanish, there's no French, there's no Dutch, there's just British, quote unquote, Little England. But what's also very important there too is in the Canadian context, we always hear about Canadian racism was imported from the US. Always hear that, which is a fallacy, but that's neither here nor there. If you look at US history, those planters in the Carolinas, South Carolina, North Carolina, they were imported. They were migrants. They were newcomers from Barbados.
Yes.
So when you talk about the roots of anti-Black racism, the roots of enslavement, the roots of DEI, the roots of white supremacy, the roots of whatever you want to call it in English-speaking Caribbean and the British West Indies, in the United States, in Canada, it originated in Barbados.
Yeah.
And that gives me, that's why I say almost in a negative but positive light, that gives me the confidence when I know my history.
Yes.
That I'm able to navigate whatever you throw at me. None of this is new to me. Maybe not new to me personally, but new to my family, new to my ancestors. Because we've seen the bottom of the bottom.
Yes.
We've seen the Drax Hall. We know Drax Hall, like I said in our last episode, walking distance from my mother's home, Ellerton, St. George. Drax Hall, the dude Drax, wrote the book on enslavement. So for me, none of this is new.
Yeah.
None of this is new, and it gives, and I hate to use the term resilience, it gives resilience to Bajans, whether they're in Barbados, whether they're across the Caribbean, they're in Canada, to know that we come from this.
Yes.
We know this inside and out. We know you better than you know yourselves.
But that's the perception that they don't. They flip it the other way.
There you go. And I think that's for me where it's very important that we learn about ourselves.
Yes.
You know, Bob Marley said, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. You know, once you learn about who you are, it gives you that confidence to navigate particular spaces. You learn about yourself. No one can tell you who you are because you know who you are. And I say this with kids all the time. You have that confidence. Not necessarily have to be arrogance.
No.
It's just a confidence that you can say, well, you know, Black is bad, but no, it's not.
No, it comes with a certain level of not only confidence, but a certain level of power.
Yeah.
Because I will talk in regards to myself, what I've been able to learn, what I've been able to decipher has totally changed. Like for my brother, I advocate for his health.
Yeah.
And that, you know, finding out certain information health-wise, through it in another totally different direction, it made my conversations with registered healthcare professionals completely different. Yeah. I mean, I've never seen a doctor before write out pedigree charts for me, and I'm just smiling going, isn't this funny? Right? You walk differently, if I should say that, or
That's
you
true.
walk with a certain type of light within you, because now you know.
Yeah.
You know, no one can tell you any different. No one can shake or shatter you in any way, shape, or form. And of course, they can't gaslight you.
Look, I'm glad you said that. So tying in the piece there about knowing yourself and formal education and laws.
Yeah.
As we know, it was illegal for enslaved people to read and write. Illegal. Because knowledge is power.
Yes.
Right? If you can read and understand and comprehend the society around you, you will be free.
Mm-hmm.
You will be emancipated. Hence why, even now we're tying, again, I said in the other episode, these diachronic realities, that why do we continue to have this idea or this ideology or this ideation that Black kids shouldn't succeed?
Yeah.
Black kids are inherently, quote unquote, stupid. Because if you keep them stupid, quote unquote, then they don't have power.
Yeah.
And so for me, and I push this quite a bit in the book, this culture of education.
Yes.
Again, I'm trying to flip these ideas that, no, in fact, if you're a kid who lives in Toronto, lives in Scarborough, lives in Mississauga, and a teacher's trying to tell you, no, you shouldn't be educated. I'm like, wait a second. No. I come from a culture of education.
That's right.
No, this is my birthright to be educated. Because I know education, particularly looking at this book, education went hand in hand with migration. Because we know folks who had to be highly educated to even get the domestic service roles, to work on London transport, to be the nurses, to be the quote unquote servile or servants in our society. They had to be overly educated. So if you teach these kids these things, it empowers them to say, well, no, I am going to read a book.
Yeah. And then I guess that just ties in with the being able to access the archives. I know we were talking about before we were recording, but I mean, it just ties in, because if you're not able to access these spaces to be able to look at these documents and to breathe in hundreds of years old dust, I mean, it does do something to actually see this all written down in black and white.
Yeah. And it's terrifying.
Yeah.
It is terrifying when, even if you listen to this podcast or watching this podcast, or your other podcasts, and you're like, oh, this can't be true. And then you go in the archives, you're like, yo, somebody sat down and said, yeah, no, it's too cold for Black people. They can't come. Like, what? Like, you could actually say that? That's on, that's in the Hansard, that's in official records, that's in law. It is. And I think that's also a function of archives, right? A function of archives is to make it intimidating for the lay person, for the regular person, because if everybody had free reign to go into an archive, now they have unadulterated access to the truth. It's not secondary sources that a professor wrote or a student wrote. You can go in there and learn about, whoa, the Taylors were this and that and this. The Stuarts were this and that and this. Oh, wait, the Stuarts had all this property? Wait a second. Oh, they had access to this? Wait a minute. Oh, so-and-so stole this property from... Wait. So it's really about breaking down those intimidating factors and also explaining to people, well, a lot of this stuff is online now too. But how do you access that online? Right?
Well, I would say that's another narrative that's pushed out there to say everything's online.
Yeah, not everything. I'll tell you right now. No.
There's not, everything won't be online. No. It will never be online.
And some things you can't digitize.
Yeah.
Some things you fundamentally can't. And we were saying before we're recording, the Lazarettos of the National Archives, which is at Cave Hill in Barbados, half of it burned down. Yeah. Right? And a lot of it was not digitized. And so that means a lot of these histories and family histories are gone forever. Yeah. So for me, it's really about introducing to folks that, these archives are free. Like, being paid for. Just break down those barriers. The same thing like a university campus. There's no walls that say you can't walk on the campus. But it's the idea that if you're not a student, if you're not a professor, you can't go on. So we need to break down those barriers. It's taxpayer money. You're paying for it.
Well, not only that, especially in the Western world, if you just go to your local public library,
there you go.
You can get things transferred from interlibrary loans type of thing.
Easy. And you pay for it. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think people understand, you as a taxpayer, when it's taking that check, the money out your check, you are paying for these services, so use them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I mean, I definitely have, here in Toronto, going to the reference library.
There you go.
And getting microfiche transferred from the National Archives in Ottawa.
There you go.
So,
and it's fun too. I tell people it's fun if you I don't think people do it anymore. Back in the day, you had to go and put the film in and
Yes.
spin it.
Yeah.
It's really cool to see what somebody is writing 50 years ago.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Oh yeah. It's as you said, it's very eye-opening. I mean, I'll just give an example. When I went to London and to see, they give you everything that you require, even more. And then to see this letter, this 10-page letter by Mr. Quire, Esquire, in terms of why he did not get compensated for, owning the enslaved people, and writing a 10-page letter as to why he should. And I'm like, a 10-page letter?
Yeah. And it's handwritten too. No one was sitting on a Word processor. No one was on Microsoft Word and pushing it out. Somebody sat there, perfect penmanship, by the way, and doing it.
It was fantastic. I was like, damn, this is like artwork. But, it's just, then again, with the archives as well, I know when I went to Jamaica, it's limited.
Yeah.
It's getting limited. You have to have now appointment.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is this? I used to just show up and be able to go in. And now you're telling me an appointment. Yes, part of that is due to COVID, but they've maintained it.
Yeah.
And it does limit the access.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole, in the academic space, there's an entire field of study on archival research and maintaining archives.
Yeah.
And on one end, I do understand that because, again, everybody wants to access it and you have very limited resources.
Yes.
Human resources, financial resources, because particularly in the Caribbean, it costs a lot of money in AC and air conditioning because you need to keep these documents cool. Yeah. It costs money. So on one end, I understand the limitation, but the other end, when you start limiting people's who these are their histories and these are their identities, it again creates this limitation to access.
Yeah.
The limit to access where that's what education has become. If you have to pay for school.
Yeah.
If you have to pay for a book, you have to pay to get behind a firewall. It's the exact same thing. But if it's freely accessible, more people are going to learn, more people are going to be empowered, and more people are going to have the opportunities to move forward.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a double-edged sword, knowing that it takes resources, but at the same time, when you, as you mentioned, you limit that access, only the quote-unquote elite are going to know the truth.
That's right. It's only going to be a certain sect in society that will know it and will be aware of what that information is. Because I know for myself, I went in and my aunt said, well, Wendy, other people have gone in and have come out with nothing. Yeah. You've come out with a boatload of information. What are you doing differently than what they would have done? So, and then it goes, I want to, really touch on the whole familiarity of the fact of migration, knowing that they were within the British Empire. However, there were some things that were, of course, familiar from home that they ended up seeing in Canada as well. And I think you mentioned about the Bank of Nova Scotia.
Bank of Nova Scotia, yeah.
And if there was, just talk a little bit more on that point, because that too helps assist, makes things a little bit more digestible being in a foreign land.
I really want people I'm a visual person. So if we looked at a map differently, because right now we look at a north-south map that Canada is above the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Flip the map and look at it not vertically but horizontally. That you had the UK on one side, you had the African continent on the other side, or below it, quote unquote, but beside it, let's say beside each other. Then you had the Caribbean and Canada. And it's no longer Canada is above, but Canada is beside.
Yeah.
And think too, when we talk about the visualization, that Canada was a colony, just like Barbados, Jamaica, Antigua, St. Vincent. Not that they're better, they were a colony.
Yeah.
And in most cases, these West Indian Caribbean colonies were much more profitable, much more valuable than Canada, than British North America. So I say that to say that the familiarity that folks have seen coming from the Caribbean, so the Bank of Nova Scotia, codfish, English language, right? Mind you, driving on different side of the road, but that's another conversation for another day. These were experiences that they were getting as British subjects in the Caribbean. So they were on equal footing as British subjects. And so when you flip that understanding and flip that thinking, you're like, wait a second, this makes sense. On top of that, in the education system, it was the exact same British curriculum. They're doing the 11 plus. Yeah. They're writing the Cambridge exams. They actually had more formalized education than a lot of folks were getting here in Canada. So for them, they had much more attachment to the UK as British subjects, and were kind of looking down on Canadians like, who are you? I'm better than you. Which in many cases they were. So that's where you see that familiarity, but also, and rightfully so, I'd argue, a sense of superiority. Mm-hmm. That we're getting our access directly from the UK. And you were trying to make this whole Canadian thing. What's that?
Yeah. And I guess, I know that you kind of ended your book on the fact of what we can look forward to. Yeah. And I guess that will be the ending of this particular conversation. Yeah. What are those positivities that we can kind of look forward in terms of this whole migration piece and to the next generation?
I mean, it's funny because the book came out 10 years ago now, and I'm only 25 years old. So I don't know how I wrote a book when I was 15. I think for me, it's especially now that I wrote this racial awakening, 2020 with George Floyd. I think now it's the lessons that you see here have, I hate to use the term overcome and resilience and everything. The lessons you see here were written before there's this groundswell of DEI, EDI, and these supports. I don't even think I mentioned EDI or DEI at all in this book. But you can take these next steps moving forward to say, well, hey, this is a trajectory that we can take. We can see that if kids, and I always come back to kids, understood that they come from a culture of education. And you can define education whichever way you want. Education could be learning your music. Education can be understanding what sport is fundamentally about and how sport can be empowering. Education can be formal education in a classroom. It could be manners. It could be habit. It could be culture. It could be whatever it is. If you understand this culture of education can emancipate you from the shackles of oppression, can liberate your mind. If you can take that and see what your families have come through without having a quote unquote formal education. Look at the platform that you're on now in the 2020s and 2025 and 2026. You take that. You don't need a DEI, token hire, none of that kind of stuff. You can take these lessons and apply them to your own life, your own sphere of influence that you can move forward in whichever way you want to move forward. There's no rubric. There's no framework of what a quote unquote good life is. Yeah. There's no framework of what a liberated life is. For me, for liberation is about your humanization. It's about being a person, a full person, how you want to live. And I think that's the next step that, funny enough, still makes this book relevant a decade later, which is wild to me. It's a decade that you can take this and understand and learn and say, well, Christopher just wrote about his parents in this book. Yeah. Christopher's not special. Well, maybe I should ask my mom and my father or my grandma or my auntie or my uncle about their story. And if they're not going to tell you certain pieces or they're going to hide certain pieces, maybe you might pause and be like, hey, I get it. I get it. And give them the space to be and exist.
Oh, that's a good way to summarize it, because again, it can be challenging when you cannot get information. But again, it's part of that whole migration, part of what our history is, and part of what our narrative that we need to own it. Yep. So I appreciate your time for coming on and speaking to this, because it's been fabulous. And for me, I could probably talk for many more hours about it, but
get a new person. My voice is tiring, man. You gotta get a new person. But no,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you so much, Wendy.
Hoped you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please make sure to like, follow, subscribe, and write a review for the episode wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you.